everybody, it's Scott Stoltz of Create Your Great, and we are about to start my second.
There we
I
go.
get to watch myself in two places.
Go back. Okay.
We're going to get started with our Create Your Great podcast. I'm sitting here with Kim Dawson, the sassy strategist, entrepreneur, consultant, creator. Hi, Kim.
Hi, look, I'm watching too. Look,
I know,
this is
that's
great.
awesome. This is what I love about this. So
you want me to share this, right?
please, yes.
I'm just going to share
Get it out to your world.
Share
And
it to
thanks
a
for hanging with
page.
us. If you want to hang tight for a couple minutes, we're going to get started.
Yes.
Or you'll see this later in recording.
I think I did it.
Awesome. So, and look, I'm on delay there. That's even different.
I know, isn't that funny? Well, this is great.
It is funny.
It's a fun experience. Okay.
And Kim and I, we were going to get started about 30 minutes ago, but Kim just gave me an in-depth tutorial on audio, podcast production, should we say?
Yeah.
So Kim's, let's talk about that for a minute. As I get started and I hit play on our podcast, which I can always edit the opening later, but I'm so excited to be sitting here with Kim because Kim and I, we've known each other for a few months now, but we've really gotten to know each other in the last month. And today, stick around, even if you're watching this on recording later, because we're going to get some great insight and wisdom from Kim Dawson on some of her story and how she came to create, and I love that word, I'm all about it, create her business, her work, and her fulfillment. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
You have quite a story we're going to dive into here.
Yes,
So as we're getting started on my podcast, so you've been doing a podcast for a while now, right?
Yeah, so I started my podcast in 2015. It's called the Sassy Strategist Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's changed a little bit. I actually took the last almost year off from it, and then I'm rebooting in January, so I'm relaunching. And this is so funny because I'm relaunching it, and the episode is going to be my 18th episode as the first in the year 2018, which I just thought was funny. I don't know.
On the 18th?
I could put it on the 18th, and then it would be 3 18s. So I just thought that was interesting, that my 18th episode is the first launch in the year 2018.
Oh, I got you. Okay, the 18th. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
That syncs up. Sometimes the universe works in funny ways for us, and there's probably a sign or message behind there. What is the what's the premise or the goal behind your podcast?
Yeah, so my idea was that I feel that there's a lot of, in the business world, in the entrepreneurial world, there's a lot of motivational stuff out there. I mean, you can get inspired, people can really, get you all fired up, but there's not really a lot of how-tos. There's not a lot of content telling you how do you actually do something. So I feel like we've got a lot of very motivated entrepreneurs out there that are kind of sitting there going, what do I do now? So when I came up with the podcast ideas, I wanted to interview people who are successful entrepreneurs, but also regular people that we can all relate to, that would share their story of, this is how I kind of went from nothing to something. And then they share that story. They talk about how they got funding, whether or not they bootstrapped, how did they launch a product. Like, I've interviewed people on the show that have launched retail-based products that are in stores throughout the country. Well, how do you do that? Because maybe you have an idea for a product, but you have no idea how to get it into a store. So I wanted to interview these people so that you can listen and say, oh, I've always wanted to launch something. Now I know how to do it because Kim interviewed this person and they told me the story. So that was really the intent.
So it sounds like, if I'm hearing this right, your podcast is an extension of your work. You teach and help people get off the ground. And you have a lot of great experience, which we'll get into a little bit. But you bring the stories and the track record of other people who've done it, and it's like a case study. It's like, here's another way of getting your business started.
Absolutely, yeah, because I think that the more stories we hear about how people actually do things and accomplish things, the more we just have this great information coming in.
It is, yeah. So, and do you have any trouble finding your guests? Is it organic, and hey, you collaborate with somebody in another venture, or you just come across and meet them, and then you say, hey, this could be a great person on my podcast? How do you go about finding good guests for your audience?
Actually, the thing that's worked the best for me, which I need to get going again in 2018, is meeting people at conferences. So a lot of times when I go to a conference, that tends to pull in entrepreneurs, and I've been to conferences as small as 300 entrepreneurs and as big as 14,000. And when you go to these conferences and you network with people, and I'll just meet somebody and go, wow, this person has a really cool story, or they have a really cool business. I'd love to hear how they did this. That's usually how I meet people. And I say, hey, do you want to be on my podcast? And they agree.
Oh, I love that topic too, because there's a whole strategy, really, and what should be an authentic, organic strategy about how you connect with people in places or at places like conferences.
Yeah.
Because, there's a lot of people, there's a lot going on, and a lot of people show up with different intentions. And a lot of people show up with really good intentions, but they want to get their message out, they want to introduce themselves to many people, they might have a product, they're looking to get out to market. So it's kind of interesting when I've been to conferences, the confluence of different goals and intentions that other people have.
Yeah.
So what's your strategy when you go to a large conference? And if you're not, let's say you're not doing a breakout, you're not one of the speakers, what is your agenda? Like, how do you go about meeting people in such an environment like that?
Well, usually I attend the breakout sessions, or I attend whatever events are going on throughout the day, and I just strike up conversation with who's ever sitting next to me. So it could be over mealtime, it could be in a session, and I'll just say, hey, hi, I'm Kim, how are you? What do you do? Who are you? And I ask a lot of questions. So that's usually how I do it.
So that's great advice for anybody who watches now or listens later, is when you go, because a lot of people have some mental blocks or hurdles too. I know that 10 years ago, I was a lot shyer about going into a big room full of people I didn't know. I usually could strike up conversation, but I struggled talking about certain things, especially when it came to myself. So for you, it's just start asking questions and introducing yourself and letting the conversation go where it may, or any other nuggets for people about because that's a big part of what we do, getting out and networking and connecting with different people.
Yeah, the approach, I guess, or the strategy I use is I'm a big fan of Dale Carnegie. So I apply a lot of Dale Carnegie strategies in my overall life. So I do it in my personal life, I do it in my business, and just being genuinely and authentically excited to hear other people's stories and to meet people. Because when I see somebody at a conference or anyplace else, I genuinely want to know, like, who are you? Like, what's your story? Where are you from? What's your life like? What's your favorite food? Like, I'll just ask anything, and I want to know. And I think that for me, it makes networking easy, because I just look at the world as being full of unique, individualistic people that all have an interesting story to share, and it makes my life more interesting because I get to hear their story.
That's so great, so important, and because people ultimately, we like to be asked questions about what we do. Right. So that's a great end. That's one thing that I found. One hurdle, even in my professional life and corporate life, is if I was ever at something or in a big meeting, that's what I did, is I said, instead of making it about me, let's make it about them. And it just makes the conversation go a lot smoother, easier, etc. So that's great. Any other nuggets you want to share about, before we start talking more about your business, about your podcast, anything else coming up? So episode number 18 in 2018, what else is going on?
Well, outside from the podcast or on the podcast?
Anything else on the podcast?
Anything else on the podcast? I'm really looking to find some very interesting guests for this year. I want to find some people that are from all over the place. I love interviewing people, even in other countries, just any place where I think the interview and the story is going to captivate whoever is listening. Because you know what it's like. I mean, sometimes you watch something, you listen to something, and you're just bored by it. And I don't want people to feel bored. I want people to listen like, oh, this story is really cool. This is fascinating. Sometimes I look for people that sell really interesting products too. Something that's a little off. I don't want to say not mainstream, but I have a personal interest in social entrepreneurship. So I really like doing interviews, and I've done several of these on my podcast, where the business is really built around how are you helping the world? What are you doing to contribute? I had one guest who, she was 24, 25 years old, and her best friend, or one of her best friends, was dying from cancer at like 24 years old, which is so young. And it propelled her to start this online website where people who are grieving and suffering could log in, and everybody can sign up for things. So they can say, oh, well, I'll make her a meal on Friday, you make her a meal on Saturday, who's going to take her to the movies next week? Like, it could be any of this kind of stuff. And she actually built a whole website around this, and now she's been in business now maybe 7 or 8 years.
Fantastic.
And it's something that was like this passion that she had to help people, and at the same time she's able to make a profitable business out of it.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
I love it. So all right. So if you yourself, or any social entrepreneurs out there, and we'll reiterate some of your contact information later in the show. But be sure to reach out and introduce yourself to Kim Dawson. You might be a great connection for a future podcast. And you just raised the bar for us because we can't be boring now. We can't be boring. We got to keep everybody's attention. So let's segue in. And once again, welcome. Thank you, everybody on Facebook Live. Recording now for a future podcast. I'm sitting with Kim Dawson, the sassy strategist, entrepreneur, creator, and consultant. And Kim, you know, when we talked and got to know each other a little bit more over the last couple of months, one thing that really struck me about your story, and one thing I know I wanted to tee up and get into today, is I found with you, and I want to share this with our audience, that you, over time, found what really the things were that you're good at, that you like, that you enjoy. You pieced it all together after going through some turbulent times, and you created a business for yourself. And here you are today. And you know, how does that? We can re-engineer a little bit backwards. But how does it feel today? Let's start in the present, knowing that what you do every day is something that you yourself created.
How does that feel? That's a big question. Mm-hmm. That really is. I think it feels really good for me because I'm the type of person that I didn't grow up saying to myself, I want to do this one thing, and then went to college to do it, and then became it, right? So I never said, I want to be an engineer, and took engineering, and now I'm an engineer. Like, it didn't work that way, and I think that I assumed it would. I think that as a kid, I thought that I know what I like, and that's what I'm going to be. And then I found that I would try different things out, and nothing was working the way I thought it would work. And I think what's funny about what I do today is if I had asked myself 20 years ago that I would grow up and be a business strategist, I wouldn't have even known what that was. And I think that that's the interesting thing about people's careers. Because I know you obviously do a lot with career development. And I think that something that people like myself struggle with is we're looking for this definition that everybody knows, like a textbook definition of what am I going to be when I grow up. And the reality is that a lot of people end up doing things that don't necessarily have a title or a clear description, but we follow a path of what we love to do and gravitate towards it without necessarily consciously thinking about it. So I think that what makes me feel good is that I found something that I seem to be good at least people tell me that I'm good at it, and it's not something that I would have picked out of a book.
No. And 10, 15 years ago, well, let me ask you this. Did you ever feel crippled by thinking that you had to do something that fit a certain title or role? Did you ever struggle with that when you were a little bit younger?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people do. And I think for me, part of it is that, as part of my personal story here, my parents are both uneducated, no college. My father's an artist, my mother's a musician. I grew up with no money of any kind. And I think I really feared growing up and having a job where either people didn't respect me, or I didn't make money, or that I think that when you grow up that way, you tend to be a little bit, you're nervous that you make the wrong decision. You know, I wasn't thinking I'm going to grow up and be a musician myself, because maybe people will say, well, you didn't go to college or you didn't do this. So I think when I was younger, I struggled with that, thinking that I had to do certain things to prove myself. And now I don't feel that way anymore. You know, now I just feel like it's all about what makes you happy.
Mm-hmm. You know what, Deanna, tell me if this makes sense to you, that you probably are doing more pressure-filled work, intense work, people rely on you, yet you yourself are probably 10 times, 100 times more comfortable than you were at 23, 24, when maybe the job you were doing at the time was not nearly as much pressure, stress, intensity. Does that make sense? Because you are in your comfort zone. You know what you do today is what you're meant to do. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. So I think it's funny because I don't know if I was less confident then, in the sense I feel I had an attitude when I was younger. Like, I feel like I thought I knew everything, and so...
Well, you may be the exception a little bit then, because I know for myself, and I worked at a newspaper for 2 years out of college, which was always my intention. But once I left the newspaper and I went to work at a health insurance company, I always felt an intense amount of pressure and stress to perform. Partly because I've always had high standards for myself, but just because I lacked a little bit in confidence, I was a little more insecure. And now I feel like all the onus and responsibility is on me and my business, but I'm much more in tune with everything. I'm much more confident, comfortable. the courage is there for me every day to do this, and I don't struggle with some of that. You just might have been wired differently as a younger person. Not everybody is extremely confident young, but maybe you were a little bit more further along in that area in your 20s.
I don't know. Yeah, I think I was, like a lot of people, I think I was confident about certain things and not as confident about other things.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I was always like that as a kid. And I remember my first job out of college, I was working as an accountant. And for anybody that knows accountants, you know that when tax season comes, you're expected to work nearly every day of the week, really long hours. And I mean, I was literally just out of college, my first job, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing Saturdays. Like, I can't do Saturdays. I have other things to do. And I look back now and I can't believe that I had this attitude, but I did. Like, I felt like I needed to set my boundaries and tell the partners of the firm that I had these boundaries. And I laugh at this now, but yeah, I don't know if that was a confidence thing.
Wait, how did that go over with these folks?
It was okay. It was fine.
Was it? Okay. I was gonna say maybe it didn't endear you to them, but
yeah. So this is my secret on this, whether or not this is good or bad. But I always had this mentality that keep yourself a little bit further ahead than everybody else. Have some skill, some trait that sets you apart. And then you can call the shots. You can choose your life. So that was sort of my attitude at 22 years old. So
I love that. I love talking to people about, thank you for sharing that, because I love talking to people about how you differentiate yourself. And maybe we'll work our way back to that. I would love to if we have time, because that's really important. And there's so many ways to do that in a good, authentic, productive, positive way. Nothing phony about it.
Right.
Not doing anything that undercuts other people, or you're stepping on people along the way to make yourself look better. There are really good ways to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. Because whenever I've worked in any type of a job, or even now with what I do, I never look at myself as competing with other people or feeling the need to, I don't really focus on other people in that perspective. I never have. It was always on like, what can I do? Am I doing my best? Am I really putting, everything I've got into this, and am I being my true authentic self? So that was always my focus for me.
That's awesome. Well, I am going to touch on that one then for a second, because that's important. I look at what I do, I think about what you do, and there's a lot of people out there coaching, helping businesses. So just imagine, and I want you to answer it, not me, but just imagine if you were to compare yourself to so many of these other businesses or entrepreneurs who do this work. You would bog yourself down almost daily, wondering if you were keeping up with the Joneses. So what else? That's not an issue for you. You try to block all that out.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because the way that I look at it is, and what I do, it's a very personal thing. Even if it's in a classroom setting, I'm still getting to know 10 people in my class by the end of the day, right? So we're building a relationship. And I look at it as any relationship, right? So you have all these different people out there. And if you want to think like these are all the people that you compete with, you really don't, because it's almost like saying that you're competing with all of these people to make a friend. Or I'm going to stick with that example. Like, different people connect, right? So you and I can connect and be friends, but maybe somebody down in that building over there, if you met that same person, you might not connect with them, right? So I think that it's more about sort of this chemistry that we have with people. So if people are going to choose me over somebody else, it's because they have a chemistry with me that they don't have with somebody else. And that happens because we're all individuals. So really there is no competition. It's just that we're this world filled with individual people, spirits, however you want to look at it, that connect on different levels with different people.
Seth Godin says, when you speak in front of a big audience, it's not for everybody. There might be somebody here who's dozing off. There might be somebody there who's checking his or her phone. You're not for everybody. And by the same token, that connection you're talking about, you could be in a room with just 10 people and maybe 4 or 5 of them really connect and go to that level where you say, because it's really important when somebody chooses you that they have that trust and that comfort level with you. So let's talk about that for a minute. So let's talk a little bit more about what you do. What kind of strategy, consulting, and business advice do you offer, and what do you do, for example, in your workshops?
Sure. So basically what I do is I work with entrepreneurs and business owners, and I help them achieve what they want to achieve with their businesses. Because anybody who's an entrepreneur knows it's not really just a job. It's sort of an extension of who we are and what we're trying to create in our lives, right? Because entrepreneurs don't really want to have that separation. I don't think that they want to wake up in the morning and go to a job and turn off their personal life, and then now they're at their job, and then they go home, and then they switch the light back on. It doesn't work like that for us, right? So we want to have this one consistent life. So when I help them, I do focus on their business, but I do it in a way where they feel that they're accomplishing their overall goals. So I'm a very big numbers person, so I do focus a lot with revenue and strategies and how should people price their services and their products and what kind of revenue plan should they have. But I really kind of dive into people's businesses and I nitpick apart and analyze things and say, you know what, this is great, but you could be doing this better. This is a great strength of yours. I'd like to see you boost this up in this way. This is a weakness you've got. This is how we're going to correct it and fix it. So the overall result is that they feel that they have a business that's functioning properly, efficiently, and that they're achieving the goals that they want.
What does your common or typical client look like? Not on the outside, but what are they new entrepreneurs? Have they been in business for a couple of years, but they're struggling and they just don't know how to go from A to B? Or are you more with the 0 to 1 people who are just starting out? What does your typical client look like?
Usually my client has been in business for a few years because I'm going to backstep a second. What I tend to find with a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners is that they start out with all this excitement and passion. They've got an idea, they want to fly with it. So they just start acting. They don't really plan, they just start acting. I'm going to make a phone call, I'm going to send an email, I'm going to see if I can get this job, I got to make a little bit of money. And in the beginning it's a lot about money because they have no money coming in, so they've got to get the money coming in. So that's how it starts. But then what happens is they kind of get stuck on the ball's rolling, and they now are in business for a few years, but they're still in what I call reactive mode. So they wake up in the morning and they're just like, all right, what do I have to do today? I have to send these emails, I have to do this, I have to do that, but they're not planning. And so if they have a goal of, I want to own a $5 million business, or I want to build a team where I have 100 employees and we're national and we're doing all of these things, you can't actually implement those plans because you're not taking any time to plan because you're waking up in the morning just responding to emails. So I find that what happens is these people that have been in business for a few years, they get stuck. And they see off in the distance what they want, but they're so wrapped up in this, and my job is to come in and say, okay, I'm going to pull you out of that, and now let's look at the plan and get you where you want to go.
And do you ever, in the course of the work of helping them, are you ever helping them shift or clarify their purpose and what they're doing? I have a coach, I have a business coach, and as I've told him and others many times, I feel like from the start I knew my what and my why. I knew what I wanted to do, refined it a little bit with the career fulfillment piece, but I knew what I wanted to do, and I know why I do it every day. I just needed the tools on the how. So are you more of the how? Well, clearly you are the how, but do you do some of the what and why, like help people re-clarify that?
Yes and no. And I say yes and no because I think it's hard for me to know what somebody else's why is. I think that's something that's very internal. So I think I would almost feel inappropriate if I told somebody else, like, this is why you should be doing this. There's just something to me that's not right about that. I want them to know that. That's a journey for themselves. So I'm much more focused on the how. The thing that I do sometimes do that's a little bit of shock therapy is a lot of times people are really passionate about something, but their idea is not a profitable idea. They love it and it's great, but it's never going to make them any money because it's just not a sound idea. Right. So sometimes I'm a little bit of that reality of saying, you know what, I know you really love doing this, but can we tweak this just a little bit so that we can make this so that you're still happy with what you're doing, but it's on a profitable plan.
This is huge. So that's big. And you have like that obligation. My coach always pounds into my head, I have a moral obligation to help people with what I do. Do you have that sense, and do you feel like, oh boy, I have to tell this person what they want to do is not right? Like, how do you feel when you go through that exercise of practice? And maybe it doesn't happen a lot. We don't need to overstate it, but have you been through that? And do you have to say, hey, wake up, this is not going to work?
Whether or not this is a good or a bad thing, this is part of my personality. I look at business in a very black and white type of a manner. I'm a very data and numbers driven, like I said, type of person. So I don't look at it so much that I might be hurting somebody's feelings or crushing their dreams. I look at it like a spreadsheet. Like, here, this is the way it is. You're making this now, you're losing money, you need to do this, and then you're going to not lose money. Like, I'm just very pragmatic about it. So I'm empathetic.
Good, you need to be, right?
I'm empathetic, definitely empathetic, but I don't want them getting wrapped up in that emotion or being too tied to an idea, because that's actually when we don't grow. We don't grow when we're so like firm on, I have to do this and there's no other option. We have to be open-minded, because that's when we really discover and create.
Good for you. I like it too. And you just have to, sometimes you have to, we as professionals, coaches, consultants have to cut out some of the emotion and be pragmatic and we owe it to people and to ourselves to be direct. Before we get more into your backstory, which I really am anxious to get into, I want to go back to one other thing you said about an entrepreneur, they don't have a big divide between their work and their personal life or the rest of their life, which I agree with that, but let's unpack that a little bit more. So do you think that applies mainly or only to entrepreneurs? What about Sally or Joe who get up and go to work every day from 8:30 to 5:30 or 8:30 to 6? They have a good job. They have a job that's busy. They have a lot of responsibility, I should say. Are people who do that for years, are they conditioned and programmed a little bit differently versus somebody who has started and created their own business and has a lot of their own, I know it's a cliche, but their own blood or sweat and equity into it? Like, what do you mean when you said that entrepreneurs really don't differentiate as much?
It's interesting that you put it that way, because I would actually say that I would hope that anybody, no matter what your job is, that you don't feel the separation. I think that that's something that, and I mentioned it specifically to entrepreneurs because I think that a lot of entrepreneurs have been in situations where they've worked for a company and been made to feel like they had to have this separate identity. And they don't like how that feels, so they say, okay, I'm going to go into business for myself so I can avoid feeling this way. But ideally, I think that no matter what you do, you should feel that your work is an extension of who you are as a person. You should be passionate about what you do. You should care about it. You should be excited. And it's funny because one thing that sticks in my head was when I graduated from college and I was at my graduation ceremony. There was this man who was some business guy in the area. I don't remember who he was specifically, but he was the one who gave the keynote. He gave the speech. And the one thing that I remember him saying to us was he said, when you go out into the world, get up in the morning and love what you do. And be so excited to just go to work every day that it's just something that you're passionate about. And if you don't feel that way, you're on the wrong path. And it stuck with me because I think that everybody should feel that way.
I love it. You had the benefit of having somebody say that to you in a powerful, clear, passionate way, and maybe some people don't have that experience, and clearly it resonated with you. And I have a feeling, I've thought about work-life balance, we'll get into in a second, but would you give any advice to people who are struggling with that, who wake up every day and don't have that feeling? What would you say to them?
Well, I'd say it's time to reevaluate. To figure out if you're not happy doing what you do, why are you not happy? What is it that's making you unhappy? Is it that you don't like the schedule, that you don't like the company, that you don't like the people you work with, that you don't like the work that you're doing? What is it exactly? Because I think that it's important that we're happy in life. I think that's one of the most important things in our lives is to be happy. So taking time to sort of reevaluate what's bothering you.
Yeah.
And then figuring out how you can fix it.
It ties in somewhat, but I just will mention, I feel very strongly that work-life balance is one of the stories and programs out in society today that can harm us. Just because it for a lot of people, it will encourage or help make you think that you have to have a certain type of balance. And when you don't reach it, even in your heart or mind, you set yourself up for disappointment. I'm not spending enough time with family or friends, or I'm not doing enough of the gym or at work for that matter. And I try to tell people there are times, there are weeks, there are days, there are months when you need to spend a heck of a lot of time working. That's a big part of your life. And then maybe, this summer you take 2 weeks to decompress or go away somewhere. And there's a million different ways to look at it and do it. But I try to encourage, get rid of that work-life balance whole mindset and moniker, and throw yourself into the things that excite and make you, or you feel passionate about. That's part of what I'm hearing from you too, is like, no matter what you do, having that feeling in the morning is really important.
Yeah, I think
and
it
helpful
is.
in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right too about, I think that term work-life balance gets thrown around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more about having a lifestyle that works for you.
Yes.
Whatever it is, because some people love to work, that it fuels them and they want to work all the time. And if that's what you want to do, then do it. But if you need to take a weekend off, you take a weekend off.
Absolutely. Okay, so speaking of fuel and your fuel, so let's talk a little bit about how you got where you are today and some of the things that happened to you, or happened with and for you earlier in your life, and what led you down the path of where you created your own business and you're impacting as many people. What are some of the things you discovered at an earlier age or time in your life that brought you to this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. What really brought me to where I'm at? Well, it's funny because I first started out, I got, like I mentioned, I got an accounting degree, but I didn't want to be an accountant. I just wanted to know how to own and operate a business. And when I graduated, I didn't have any trade. I didn't know what I was going to go into business to do, so I went to work as an accountant because there was nothing else to do. But while I was doing that, I found that I was really passionate about health and wellness. And I had taken up running, and I found that it really helped my mental state. I just felt better. I wasn't depressed. I wasn't as anxious. And I found a personal connection with it and found sort of an importance to it. So I decided that was going to be my business. And what I first originally started doing was I had a health and wellness company that I worked with clients. I taught seminars. I created a wellness program that I would teach at different places in the community. And I loved what I did. I loved it because I got to feel like I was helping other people. And I found that that's really what I wanted to do, that I'm sort of this, I'm a real proud nerd. I love to study and read and research and take all this information and cram it in my head and then go out into the world and figure out how can I use all this stuff to help other people. And that's what I was doing. So I was just reading and studying, and I wound up going to college for 11 years, and I just kept studying and studying and studying, and then I'd go out and I'd help and I'd help and I'd help, and it worked great. The one downside to the health and wellness industry is you make no money in it. You make absolutely no money in it unless you're super famous and everybody knows you. So I was doing this because I was passionate about it, but it wasn't financially the best thing for me. And simultaneously, I was married and now divorced. But my ex-husband was a very technical person, and he started coming up with this idea for a software product, but he had no business background. So we kind of came together, and he was this tech person, and I was this business person, and we launched this software company, which wound up being a much more financially smart decision than the health and wellness. So I still did both, did them simultaneously, and wound up working in health and wellness for about 13 years. And the software company we started in 2002, we sold it in 2011. So I got to experience two things. In the health and wellness realm, I got to experience the helping of people working directly. But in the software company, I got to experience having a say over working environment. Because something I'm very passionate about is the working conditions of people. I'm a very conscious shopper. I try to buy things that are fair trade. I try to find out everything that I buy, where was it made, how did where does it come from, was it fair labor? So that's something that is really important to me. So I found that as an employer, I had this opportunity to actually decide, well, what are people going to be paid and what's their work environment going to like? Are we going to have flex time, which we did? Are we going to have beer Fridays, which we did? Are we going to allow people to choose when they want to come into the office and when they want to leave? Yes. And so it was really empowering for me because I felt like I was making a difference, even in this small little town, in this small little company. So after all that got through, I wound up, after we had sold the company, about a year later is when I got divorced. And it forced me, like a lot of people who go through something like a divorce, it's a very traumatic experience, worst thing I've ever been through in my whole life. And it caused me to feel like somebody hit the reset button on myself as a person. And I needed to renew and restart. So I was looking for a way to combine my passion for entrepreneurship, my passion for helping people, wanting to work with people, and it came into this whole thing of, I'm going to help people with their businesses. And that was sort of how it started.
I love the theme, the recurring theme throughout your whole story, which is a great story of you always had that urge and itch to help people.
Yeah.
So clearly you like numbers. Clearly you like being educated and going through school. I think you used the word nerd once or twice. But you still always wanted to bring something to the table to help others. Would you be sitting here today if you didn't get divorced? What you brought that in kind of at the end, and I want to go back to some other questions. But what role did that play? Was it a sense of, and I don't want to be presumptuous. That's why I'm asking. Was it a sense like, okay, I can now go out and do this. You had a great business or a good business in which with your husband, in which you learned a lot. Now I'm going to go do more of this, or what relation does that have? Do the two have together?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a funny thing because I think that anybody who's been through an experience that you feel is traumatic in some way, it's sort of the worst thing that can happen to you and the best thing that can happen to you at the same time. So it's through the bad experiences that we have where we gain our strength and where we gain insight and clarity. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that is because it forces us to go outside of our comfort zone and to look at things from a different perspective. So for me, when I was married, I lived a very different life, and it was a safer life, and it was this sort of consistent way of doing things. And there were things that I wasn't able to do because I had a very successful husband, and he was very busy, and so it sort of sometimes limited what I was able to do. And when I got divorced, and it was just me, I was like, wow, I can just do what I want, when I want, and what is it that I want to do? So for me, it opened a lot of doors, and it allowed me some space to find out who I was as an individual and not so much who I was attached to somebody else. And I think that that's a whole other thing that came from that.
That is, I love that. That is such helpful information, or just feedback, I should say, because so many people, I think I've seen, and I've not been married or divorced, but I have seen both friends and coworkers who, when that happens to them, and you're right, it's traumatic, that it creates blocks, or just it's a very difficult time in their life, obviously, and how they respond or react to it is always kind of dicey. You don't know how somebody can go. You went down a great path, and I think what you said is really helpful for others to learn from. You know, you used it and saw it as an opportunity to grow yourself further.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would highly suggest anybody do that when they're in a situation that life is not going to be what you plan. It's, no. It's going to throw you all kinds of curveballs. And I think that if you look at that as an opportunity, whenever something comes up, if it's like, okay, what's the opportunity here? There is a silver lining. What is it? And you're just determined to find it. Mm-hmm. That's when you're really going to succeed. Mark that one down,
write it down, think about it, edge it in your head. That's a great perspective. Thank you for sharing that. So, and as far as the mix of helping people, what I love working with, and let's kind of wind down the last 5-10 minutes on this theme, is, I love talking to people about finding what you're good at and finding and creating how you provide value to others. Your story, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you seem to have been pretty focused from an early age, pretty comfortable and confident in what you were doing, and knowing that you wanted to help people. But it was a journey, right? It was a journey finding what your strengths were and how you could best provide value to others. Can you share a little bit more about that part, like marrying up what you're good at and like versus how you provide the most value to people? Because that's what I really want to share and get out there to more and more people. If you can try different things and bring them together, whether you're 25, 30, 40, 55, 60, it doesn't matter. Bring them together at some point, you'll be happier and fulfilled.
Yeah, so I think if I get what you're asking, I think you're asking, like, how did I figure out what I was good at, and how did I connect that to helping other people? So I think in my example, I just kept staying curious. Like, I just always wanted to learn. And when I learned, it would take me to the path of knowing something more, and when I became more confident with it, I was able to express it outwardly. So whether it's giving a talk on something or talking about it with somebody, if you know about something, you feel comfortable talking about it. And I know sometimes when we talk about public speaking, which we do a lot of with Boston Speaks, right? Public speaking, is usually you'll be a pretty good public speaker if you know what you're saying, but it's when you don't that you can get a little fuzzy. So I think that what happened for me was I continued to learn and gravitate in this direction, and then when I shared with people, because I do love to help and I want to share with others, I was getting positive feedback. So it wasn't like it was just coming from me. It wasn't like me sitting in a chair going, I think I'm really good at this. It was more me just being me and being authentic and helping people, and then having them say, "Wow, Kim, that was awesome what you did for me. Like you just like doubled my income. How did you do that?" And like I don't know. No. But that sort of thing for me is what helped me define what I'm good at, was what do other people see in me. Yeah. But I want to add to that, in that I think part of being confident is not needing permission from other people or needing approval from other people. There's a real difference between taking feedback from others and letting it sort of swirl around in your mind and figure out, oh, okay, this is what people are saying, maybe I need to consider this. That's very different than feeling unconfident, like, oh, what if they don't like me, or what if they don't like what I'm saying, or what if they don't,
Yes.
Two very different things. So I don't know if I've really answered your question.
No, you have. Did you struggle at any point in your life? I did. I fully admit that earlier in my career, and I typically worked for bigger companies and corporations, that I was very concerned and consumed with what other people thought of me and how I came across. Part of that is because my empathy levels and sensitivity levels have always been pretty high. I'm just sensitive to what's going on around me, so it always has concerned me what other people think, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But did you ever struggle with that at any point in your career? Because what you just said is dead on. We have to differentiate between I'm worried about what they think of me or what they say or how I come across versus, oh, this is good, authentic feedback. I'm going to take and use that and build on, because I know what I'm doing is good, I know it's powerful, and I know it's helpful. So did you ever struggle with that? Not now. I know you're not now. But did you ever?
Maybe when I was like 8.
Really? Kid material there.
No. Just I think I say that, I joke, but I say that because I learned at a very young age that if I spent my life concerned about what other people's opinions were of me, that I would be miserable. I just, for whatever reason, I don't know if I'm just some kind of a strange person, but I just don't feel any inclination to go to somebody and say, will you like me? Do you like my boots? Like, I don't care. I just really don't care. What I do care about is that I'm helping people that I want to help. And I care what people think of me in regards to whether or not they think I'm a good person. I think that matters. Like, somebody saying, you know what, Kim's really honest. I appreciate that about her. That's a good thing. I want to know that people know that I'm honest. Or that people say, she's a really caring person. That's a good thing. But people care, having other sorts of opinions that maybe might be more superficial or,
So legacy, things that really are like how you'd be remembered, how you make people feel.
Yeah.
They trust you, they know you care, things like that. That matters. It's part of like your legacy, right?
Yeah, I want to know that I have purpose. Mm-hmm. I want to know that my life matters, and I think that our lives matter because of how we impact other people. Mm-hmm. And that other people can be anybody. I could sit back and say that really the only thing that matters is I'm a great mom, right? And that I'm doing the best I can with my 2 children, who are the most important people in the whole world to me. Like that matters, right? That gives me purpose. And in my work, I have purpose in how I help people. So when I work with clients and they say, Kim, thank you so much. You really helped us. And now we can have this. That makes me feel good.
You have any advice for moms out there who are parents, moms and dads, who sometimes I recently did a video talking about, this is a little different, but I talked about burnout. And a lot of times we get a story in our mind that I'm so busy, therefore I can't. Or I'm so busy, I'm exhausted, I'm wiped out. And again, I'm not a parent, full disclosure, But as a parent, do you ever struggle with times where like, I gotta do this with the kids, and you legitimately have to do it. It's not a story. You have to take them to a practice or a game or parents' night or whatever it might be. But how do you cope and handle all that? Because you do a lot of work, and I've seen you in action, and you run a business. So any suggestions or nuggets to parents out there as to how you navigate all that?
The way that I handle that is to be efficient with what you do. So the burnout that you talk about, I think it happens because people are trying to fit too much into a very tight schedule. And I think it's about reevaluating what matters to you, what are your priorities, and doing your best so that the work that you do, you don't have to work 100 hours a week to scrape by. You know, you should plan so that you can figure out how to make your career so that you don't have to work constantly to pay your bills and provide for yourself and provide for your family. And I think that when you're smart and you're sort of strategic about your financial situation, it takes pressure off of feeling like you have to work all the time. So I think that's part of it. And I think it's also important to really separate. When you're with your family, you're with your family. You should not be, I'm opinionated on this, I'm just warning you, this is a disclaimer. Like, it always frustrates me when I go to places to eat and I see parents and then their kids, and the kids are just sitting there and they have nothing to do, and the parents are like this in their phones. Just like, put the phone down. You're at dinner with your kids, you shouldn't be in your phone. So having that separation of work time is work time, family time is family time, be present, be mindful, be in the moment.
What if the kids are on their phone or on a tablet at the same time too? What do you do then?
Take it all away. It doesn't belong at the dinner table.
Yeah. Maybe I'll learn that someday, how that works.
Yeah.
So, well, this has been fantastic. What can we share with our audience now and those who listen later? What do you have going? I know I asked you about the podcast aplenty earlier, but what else do you have going on around workshops, a seminar? What are some of the things you're really focusing on as 2018 gets rolling?
Definitely doing more workshops and seminars. As you know, Scott and I are working together with Boston Speak, so I've got quite a few classes coming up. I have a one-day master class coming up this month. I think it's January 23rd, maybe, and it's an all-day, very intensive. So for people who have been in business a few years and they're struggling to kind of get it going and more, grow it, I definitely recommend that you sign up for this one day, because it's going to be a lot of work. I'm not going to lie. It's going to be a lot of work.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have a question. So if you go to that one day, will somebody get, I've been doing shorter workshops in the 90-minute to 2 hour. I have my first 4 hour coming up. And I view the shorter workshops as an opportunity to introduce thoughts and really important things to the attendees, and get them thinking about stuff. In your one-day workshop, are they going to walk away with things that they can take with them for a long-term sustainable time?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're going to actually work on a plan. So they're going to have this strategic plan. They work on it all day. They're going to bring some of their business information with them. They're going to need to do some homework before they come. And we're going to really get into their specific businesses. So we're keeping it small. It's not going to be a huge group, because we want everybody to get one-on-one attention, and really like taking your actual business, your actual products, your services, planning it all out, creating a short-term plan, long-term plan on how to grow it.
Good stuff. It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Anything else you got coming up?
I've got a couple of the shorter workshops and seminars as well with Boston Speak. So I do a lot on pricing and helping people figure out what they should be pricing for their services and their products. So we've got one of those coming up in a few weeks. And then I think I've got a 90-minute where I talk about how do you ask for money. Everybody loves that. How do you ask for money?
Give us a teaser. I love that topic too. Give us a teaser. We don't need to get specific, but what's one nugget with somebody who's struggling? How do I price? What am I worth? Blah, blah, blah. What's one?
Yes. Okay. So the quick nugget on pricing is make sure that you're not just choosing numbers out of thin air. You actually need to look at what are your expenses, what's your desired salary, what is your desired profit, and then work from that backwards to figure out, okay, well, if I have time for so many clients per month and I can only work this many hours, but I need to make this much each year to pay for my expenses and be profitable and pay taxes and have money in savings, what do I actually need to charge? So we kind of nitpick that apart and pull it apart that we know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Listen, Kim Dawson, you clearly have a lot of gifts, talent, information, and wisdom to share with people. For those who listen, watch both, make sure you check out Kim. Where can they find you online?
Oh, so my website is kdawsonco.com. I couldn't get just K Dawson. You know how it goes with URLs. So it's kdawsonco.com, and my handle on social is @sassystrategist.
I love it. And so again, there's so many good flavors and nuggets of insight that Kim you just shared with us, and I ask everybody, give some of this some thought. What are some of the things and lessons you can take from what Kim just shared? You're a great story. You're a good inspiration. I think you are definitely doing tremendous work. And remember, no matter what situation, this is what I say, whether you're a parent or not a parent, you've been working for the same company for 20 years or just started, or you've been thinking about going for your own business and opportunities, you can create. You can own your life, you can own your career, and you can create it. It just takes a little creativity, a little drive, and I would say some courage to take that leap, to put yourself out there. We know you've done it, and we want to try and help many others do the same thing. So thank you so much for listening, Kim. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me. This was fun today. Hope you all enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.